This is Among the Sierra Nevada, California, a famous painting from the Hudson River School, completed by Albert Bierstadt circa 1868. You might have seen it before, or maybe it just looks familiar because you've seen Jason Rainville's Genesis Ultimatum. Now, this isn't a realistic painting in the sense we might typically use the term. It mashes together natural features that don't exist so close. These animals were surely not in front of the artist at time of rendering, and the thing the Hudson River School is most known for, their lighting, is realer than real. Yet, the scene is real. Not only is it beautiful and compelling, but it does show things that exist, the way they exist, in a way that a viewer in 1868 could experience them as the artist who traveled to them did experience them. Art is so many different things, but it's nothing at all if it is not something to be experienced. If that sounds pretentious, it's because I'm too stupid to explain it better. In John Berger's Ways of Seeing, his first essay expounds on many of the points made in The Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction by Walter Benjamin. Berger writes, "Seeing comes before words. The child looks and recognizes before it can speak. But there's also another sense in which seeing comes before words." Consider this, which I have paraphrased from Berger. We establish our place in the world around us through seeing. And then we explain that world with words. The words we use, however, could never undo the world around us, or change that we are surrounded by it, or what we are surrounded by. What we see and what we know never quite align, though. For example, we see the sunset every evening, but we know it's the Earth rotating away from the sun. Still, that knowledge never quite fits the sight of it. We say, the sun sets, but it never really does. It never technically has. It's kind of strange, isn't it? Now consider that seeing isn't just a mechanical process where light stimulates your retina and your photoreceptors turn that into electrical signals for your brain to interpret. Rather, we only see what we look at. And that looking is an act of choice. And then something magical happens. You realize from where you can see, you can be seen. From where you can see, you can be seen. From where you can see, you can be seen. Your eye and all the others combine to make a fully credible, visible world that you are a part of, a participator in. Words couldn't make your experience any more credible. Your ability to experience anything at all is validating of your existence, which in turn is guaranteed, at the very least, by your ability to see and be seen. Dialogue is often someone's attempt to explain how I see things, or another's attempt to understand how they see things. Now that we understand that seeing is more fundamental, though, we can begin to explore its application. In our case, we can begin to really see art. But more than that, much more than that, we can begin to see each other. We can see history. We can see things that don't exist anymore, or things that never did. An image is a representation of something absent. A portrait, for example, is a representation of how someone looked or who was alive, the things they owned, how they liked to be perceived, and therefore, by implication, how people once saw them. More specifically, how the artist saw them. When we look at a piece of art, we see what the artist saw, when and where and how they saw it. What they saw and how they saw it. What they saw and how they saw it. What they saw and how they saw it. We see the Sierra Nevadas as Bierstadt saw it, which is to say, how he experienced it. And we experience it like him. We situate ourselves within the landscape, the frame like a portal. And the same is true for a magic card. When we look into the art, we see what Rainville saw, what Pancoast saw, what Fakova saw. We situate ourselves in relation to it and experience it. We feel power, joy, madness, serenity. As art movements progressed from the Renaissance to the Classical, Rococo, and Impressionism, I'm skipping a couple, art became less and less concretely representational in some cases, and more individualistic, more unique, highlighting the personal experience of the artist. The turn of the century, the beginning of the so-called modern era, was fermenting wildly with avant-garde movements. They were experimenting with abstraction, focusing on the raw emotion of a scene. In a way, many of the movements of the early 20th century could be said to focus less on feeling what the artist was seeing and more on seeing something only the artist could feel. Again, I might be too stupid to explain that better. Among all these burgeoning movements, a group of artists set out against a greater foe than the rest. Larger than aesthetics, sexuality, classism, war, or even art itself. They challenged reality. These artists fought tooth and nail to challenge what they saw and how they saw it, and as a result of their success, their paintings read like tasting a color or a grain of sand in a room you've never seen before. They're a record of what they saw and how they saw it. What they saw and how they saw it. What they saw and how they saw it. The word surreal gets a little muddy in contemporary art. There's little s surreal and big S surreal, as in Surrealism, the movement, and the surrealists who participated in it. In 1924, André Breton published his Surrealist Manifesto, identifying and outlining his movement. One intended to resolve the previously contradictory conditions of dream and reality into an absolute reality, a super reality. Surrealism was an avant-garde artistic and cultural movement born in the wake of World War I and lasting until the 1950s that had an emphasis on the non sequitur, unnatural juxtapositions, and the illogical, lacking reason or challenging it. Those are the qualities that would make you describe something as surreal. But couldn't you apply many of those things to almost any fantasy painting? Beams of light shooting from people's hands, fairies practicing science, a sad robot. Magic is illogical, unnatural, fantastic. The key difference is the context. Surreal art doesn't offer answers regarding its subjects or scenes, or if it does, the answers are even more surreal. Fantasy art offers magic as a catch-all, if nothing else. It doesn't challenge reality, it just kind of suspends it. Magic art, even the very Magic the Gathering, TM, art, makes sense in its own context. The subject is experiencing just another day in this world. The Surrealists of the early 20th century were hell-bent on having anything but just another day. Surrealists were profoundly influenced by Freudian psychology, particularly his 1899 publication, The Interpretation of Dreams. Breton and his colleagues believed mankind was preoccupied by three fundamentals of life: sex, violence, and death. And they believed creativity could unlock the human subconscious, allowing us to behave instinctually, naturally, in our real form. They would experiment with hypnosis, drugs, alcohol, seances, and borrow psychoanalytical techniques such as word association games and automatic writing to try and access that hidden area of their minds to see what bubbled up. Miro was so poor in the early 1920s that he nearly starved to death, and in his starvation experienced visions which he recounted in his hallucinatory paintings. In order to paint his iconic, nightmarish landscapes, Dali would often frighten himself with dead bugs and hedgehogs to induce tremendous anxiety and weaken his ability to distinguish what was his imagination and what was reality. Dali once said, "My whole ambition in the pictorial domain is to materialize the images of concrete irrationality with the most imperialist theory of precision." The results of his dedication to the pursuit of Surrealism's highest goal are after images of incomprehensible realities experienced at the cost of a man's sanity. The works which were most successful to the Surrealist movement were those devoid of ideals, aesthetically annihilated, and those which, as a result, make you wonder, what did they really see down there? How could the Surrealists even be sure in their success that what they opened their minds to was benevolent? I sometimes wonder if any Surrealist ever asked themselves if there might be a reason why it was all locked away. The art of Magic the Gathering utilizes the unsettling nature of the surreal to emphasize situations of horror, nightmares, dreams, madness, the things we see in the Dali-esque. Theological clouds and worldly counsel, the non sequitur mind harness, the impossible scale, lighting, figures, and setting of recurring insight is particularly powerful. Johann Voss's Go Shintai of Lost Wisdom might be my favorite example, though. The silhouette of Kamigawa stands silently on the horizon. Tendrils of falling rain diffuse the bleeding neon. Everything is cool gray. Low tide laps small but assertive waves over a beach so saturated there are standing puddles. Fixed above us is our subject, the creature for which the card is named. The humanoid figure hangs upside down, perfectly upright, like a fishing lure, shaping an origami crane from the leaflets that make up its form. 7 of these cranes encircle the form and seem to just orbit the spirit. Some of the paper squares float off of its form, and each one seems to take on a feather-like silhouette. Then, there's the face, or lack thereof. Instead, the face is hollowed out like a bowl, pouring water impossibly from the shape of the head. The water falls fluidly onto the roof of a tiny floating shrine, presumably made of the driftwood littering the beach's extreme foreground and midground, then pours onto the sand where it flows back into the sea. This painting is incredible, and it's one of my favorites in recent years. One of the most wonderful things about it is its use of values. They're perfect. Everything reads beautifully and stays interesting even in a monochromatic palette. The warmest colors in the scene are in patches of sand, but overall the value range is so compressed it's impossible to tell. You just feel it. The only truly warm thing in the scene is one single pink light glowing from a skyscraper in the background. It's not even visible on the card, and they lit up the city for final printing anyways. There's also a beautiful use of dark on light, which makes the subject pop, then light on dark, accentuating the water, then dark on light again, but in much higher contrast, but still in a much smaller amount for the shrine itself, making it the most important thing in the scene without overwhelming it. That is followed by light on light, which finishes the sequence without pulling any focus. Once you get to the shrine, your eyes stop. Nothing else pulls you away. It's beautiful. There's weight to everything, even though it's floating. It's compelling. It's Johann. It's Voss. It's magnificent. Now, the last thing I want to point out about the execution of this painting is the fact that this is an anatomically accurate, proportionate human figure. If you flip it right side up, it is painted from an above angle, and it's made of individual leaves of paper. I don't know if I can or even need to explain how wickedly incredible that is. All of these individual planes turning away and towards the light, moving in three-dimensional space, all with its own unique form, and they come together to make a humanoid figure without confusing your eye with the overlapping edges and shapes. It's just sick. Shintai of Lost Wisdom was printed in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty, the 2 years too late cyberpunk addendum to one of Magic the Gathering's worst blocks, but most beloved settings. Now, this is relevant not only because it's a spicy jab at a game I hate, but it ironically highlights my point. This is the shrine of lost wisdom. Japan's shrines have an iconic shape to them, and in the skyline of Kamigawa, off in the distance, there is a single tower with that iconic tiered roof. Off in the corner of the frame, all the way in the background, but in high contrast, both in value and shape, it stares back at us, and the shrine. The flavor text reads, "It seeks those driven by curiosity and offers enlightenment." Shintai of Lost Wisdom is not a bastion for ignorance, rather it's a beacon for those seeking wisdom that was lost. And on that lit up skyline, in the final version of the card, you can't even see that tower. Just the lights of a new age. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1. When you do, target player mills X cards, where X is the number of shrines you control. The ability of Shintai of Lost Wisdom offers you 2 choices. 1, would you like to pay? And 2, who's going to do the milling. In Magic the Gathering, the idea of placing cards from the top of your library into your graveyard, milling them, is congruent with the in-world loss of memory. Forgetting, being forced to forget, having ideas siphoned from you. There are cards which represent myriads of situations where your mind fails you. The result in extreme cases is madness, the complete loss of self. Sometimes in our frantic search for answers, we throw the baby out with the bathwater. The ego and the id, despite their vile qualities, are still very, very much us. What happens when we truly kill them? When we dig way too deep? That's the chance Go Shintai of Lost Wisdom offers you. Look, Surrealism is usually pretty dark. Sometimes it's very dark. Remember, it was created as a reaction to the aftermath of the First World War. And then all of its participating artists suffered through the Spanish Civil War, the Second World War. It reached its golden age during the Korean War. Probably plenty of other conflicts I've never even heard of. It is almost always a ventilation of frustration, pain, confusion, and they're just our best answers at figuring out how to live with it all. Something about it's hallucinatory or psychological qualities feel more tangible than real life horror. Despite that, Surrealism can serve so many different functions, especially contemporary surreal art. I mean, it doesn't work. You literally can't make surreal art of any kind without exploring your own mind, without diving into it, you know. There is undeniably something down there. I mean, there are things we do not understand about our brain. Maybe that's why we don't even understand why we like surreal art so much. It touches a piece of us we don't even know exists. Like checking behind you even though you know you're home alone. Surrealism offers a catharsis, like looking at Michael Hussar's work and thinking, wow, you too? It spoils us with some secret we shouldn't know, that's like just too juicy, or lets us taste a nectar we should not touch. You know, like it's not for us. Maybe that makes it sweeter. Surrealists offer answers you can't understand to questions you can't figure out how to articulate. Look, the truth is, like any artists, surrealists are trying to explain something they couldn't with words, with pictures. You like surrealism because it's fun, or beautiful, or a freak show, or it's just super, super cool. You just like it. Everyone does. You don't have to get it. It's not meant to get. There's no one thing to get out of it. If you want the meaning or backstory, read the plaque, whatever. Magic uses surreal art to illustrate things that might have a magic origin, but are no less real in the psychological effects being experienced by the characters in the illustration. I like to think that there's an opportunity to challenge ourselves with this kind of illustration as well. Can you empathize with it? Can you try and wrap your head around how reality warping this situation is? Can you rationalize it? How about, can you feel this too? Can you stop trying to explain it with words and just see it? When you see it, can you feel the rest of the world around you? Do you feel seen now? Do you feel real now? Have you stopped to consider, I'm not even in the room